Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. The star of today's pandemic projects is a Shimano Curado. It's a 201 model, the CU 201 model. It's a left-handed model. It's a low-profile bait casting reel. We're having problems with the sticky release button. In this case, the release button seems to just plain be stuck. And I'm going to show you how to take this reel apart and service it and fix that issue with the release. And if you have one of these, you'll see how to service it. If you're thinking about buying one of these, you'll see how it's made. So while we get started, I wanted to thank all of our first responders and all of the folks that are on the front line, essential workers, personnel, and so on, whether it's medical, nurses, doctors, anybody on the hospital staff, including administrators, EMTs, our fire and police and rescue, our truckers and teachers, and everybody else who's got a role in this thing, trying to keep us all healthy and trying to get us back to kind of business as usual as we fight this next wave of the pandemic. So thank you all. So I started with removing the nut cap, and this is a left-handed reel, so everything kind of works in reverse here. The taking off the screw is a clockwise rather than a counterclockwise. This is a 10mm screw. And what I advise you to do if you haven't worked on one of these reels, or you're a little bit nervous about it or whatever, is to go out to the website. In this case, I've gone to Mike's Reel Repair, and you can go ahead and get the schematic for this reel. This is the CU 201. It'll show you all the pieces and parts, how they come away, and that'll give you a guide for kind of where it is and what you're going to be seeing. And if you get stuck, that's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is to go ahead and take pictures along the way, like I'm doing here, and that'll show you the sequence that you take the pieces off, and when you go to reinstall, it'll be the sequence that you put them back on in. All right, we have a star adjuster. It's got a square hole there. You can see that. There's a spring that goes on next, so I like to put that right in there so I don't lose it. And then we have a button-down nut. This should also come out in a clockwise fashion. And because when you go to tighten it, it's going to sit in that square there. I'm going to put those into a parts tray, which is nothing more than the bottom of a milk jug, but it serves my purposes. When I go to reinstall this reel, I will know where to look for them. All right, now we have 1, 2, 3, 4 side plate screws, and we have a bar here, I believe, that's holding it in. So how do we get that bar out of there is usually the first question. Well, if you look at the non-gear side, we have a Shimano ring here with a little point that says lift, and under lift it says open, turning it this way. So if you kind of unscrew, that should be able to release your side plate. There you go. Some side plates have a spring that is engaged here, some do not, and you just need to figure out which one you have for your reel. There's a bearing in that side plate, so I'm going to go ahead and oil that bearing. I'm going to use Reel X, which is an aftermarket synthetic reel oil. It's a fishing reel oil. I really don't care which oils you use, but make sure that they're designed for fishing reels. Okay, that's oil. I'll just put that body part up top there, and then I can remove the spool simply by pushing through. That's your spool. And there's a bearing on this one as well, so I'm going to go ahead first cleaning that off. Then I'm going to go ahead and oil it. Now, if you needed to remove that spool axle, I get this question quite a bit. How do you do it? Because it's obviously locked in here. Well, that pin needs to be removed, and I think I showed folks before. They actually make a little tool. It's designed for pulling those pins. You can see how that works. You back it out. You would put it over the top of your axle like this, and then you would tighten down to push that through the shaft to release that axle, which would push through. So if you need to change that bearing, or if you need to remove the axle shaft for any particular reason, I recommend that tool. If you don't have that tool, good old-fashioned standby is to get something like a China lock pliers, open it up a little bit, kind of grab one side of the axle with it, and just on a little bit of a tilt so that you can clear that other piece, kind of press it through this way. I don't know if that's something you can see there, but you could also get the pin out like that in a pinch. Okay, that bearing has been oiled, and we're good to go with that. I'm just checking the spool, make sure I don't have a secondary bearing on that, and I don't, so we're going to leave that spool assembly in place. You can see that the reel's pretty well used. It's got a lot of dirt and grease and the like in there, and I suspect that's what's holding the balance of this back. So I'm going to spray this with the penetrating oil. I'm going to just use that as a cleaner here, and I'm going to spray it here to hope that maybe it can loosen that up a little bit while I'm working on it. You'll notice I'm wearing a protective glove. That's one of the reasons when I start spraying things like the penetrating oils and that, I like to make sure that I protect my hand as much as I can. While I turn that over, we see that we have a metal bar, flat metal washer and 2 tension washers. Those have to do with the sensitivity of the star adjuster when you go to put this back on. So now we're going to just go ahead and see if we can't clean some of this dirt out of here. I'll let that soak. I'm going to use a cotton swab. Get all that stuff in the channel there. And without going too crazy, I'm going to see if I can't start moving this bar up and down, and I can't, which means it's pretty well locked on this side. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to remove the side plate screws here. And I think I'm going to just wipe that off. It's not doing any good on my board there. It's what gives my board the patina, or whatever we want to call that stuff, from years of use. It looks like there's 4 screws here. I'm using a micro screwdriver. They're pretty small screw heads on these. And there's always one that's a little bit longer. These seem to be sitting in the case. I haven't been taking these out, but if you do the 4 of those, you should be able to lift the case up now, which we just did. We have the instant anti-reverse in here. I'm going to push these 4 screws through just to make sure that they're the same size. And also I don't want to lose them when I start reassembling the reel. I don't want to start looking for them thinking that they're in the case and they're not. Okay, there is one that's the long one. I thought that would be the case, and it came out of the bottom here. So when we go to reinstall, that bottom one gets the long screw. It's not unusual for reels to have different lengths of screws in the side plates, and Shimano in particular seems to do that an awful lot. All right, there's a bearing on the back here. You can take the bearing adjuster off if you like, or you can come in from behind. Either way, make sure that that bearing gets a good drink of oil. You'll notice on that cap that I removed that there's a spring. And then the cap. I'm going to put them right back so I don't lose those. And we'll just tighten that down and let that hold. I'm going to put that in the back here as well. Here's the inside of our assembly then. We have a shaft for the instant anti-reverse. We have the main gear. Those sometimes are a little difficult to get off, so pay attention. And then I probably should have done this before. I got lucky here. The 2 springs that are on the yoke just kind of shot out. So if you're doing this, instead of me doing this, I would recommend that you take the springs off first. Okay, this is your yoke and your pinion gear. Just set that in the box for a moment. This should only have 1 washer inside of it and 1 washer underneath. There's your washer underneath. And there's your washer inside. That washer looks good. I'll come back to that in a moment. While I'm at it, I have to see that there's some stockpiled grease on here, so let's go ahead and take that off. Put that right back in. keep those together and keep those in my parts tray as well. And we have the click rotor, which will be triggered to let that go. And we're working our way down to this assembly here. And the assembly is just, it's got a lot of dirt on it, and that's probably why this isn't working. There's no magic here. There's a little control arm here and a spring. And if you can just get this soaked in penetrating oil at the moment, that should be able to start to free this up. Get rid of any obvious dirt that's in there. And we'll see if we can start moving this there right away, right away. And that's it. So it was a lot of just accumulated salt probably. But it's not uncommon for that to happen. So just go ahead and do your best to clean that up. Now, if you needed to, and I'm not doing this as a general service, just happen to fix that issue, but if you needed to remove this, there's only 2 screws holding the rest of this assembly on. There's a screw that's sitting here and here. If you remove that, you're going to be able to pull this piece off. You're going to remove this spring, which controls that little trip here, and you'll be able to pull all the rest of the pieces out, but not needed. This has been solved pretty easily. And you just want to make sure what's going to happen is this click rotor is going to come and push this back up, and that's going to reset the bar, and then you're going to push it down again, and it's going to reset the bar, etc. So if you just do this a couple of times, that will work out whatever's left. I don't see any dirt, but whatever dirt is left, it will certainly work it out. And then once you're satisfied that you've got it all, just feeling a little bit more grit there. There we go. Now we got it nice and clean. So the owner of this reel said, can't understand why this is happening. Got a lot of washes it off after every use and so on. Well, it's water penetration, and the question here would really be, where's that water coming in? I wish I had an easy answer for that. I don't know where the water's coming in from, but I do know it's getting in here. My guess is the only obvious hole, well, there's 2 of them. On the down button here, you have a little bit of a space. You can see it here, which means when you're on the up button, you also have a space below, or you should. Nope, not as much. And where your pinion yoke is, it'll come in behind the spool. So regardless, fair question, and keep washing them down and service the reel regularly, and you should avoid this problem with the stickiness. Okay, just cleaned up that trip lever. Let's see what's next then. So we're pretty much done. You don't need to oil plastic. Those are self-lubricating. But you do need to oil this assembly. So I'm going to use that oil again. I'm going to kind of flood it behind, all around, just to make sure it's got a nice slip. Same thing here. And then we can kind of go about servicing the drag, rebuilding this reel. So I'm going to put that little washer on there that goes on. I'm going to pull this off. And we can remove the drag washer. Now, I think that's just discoloration. There's nothing wrong with this. It's nice and smooth. I'm feeling that. I'm using a little bit of steel wool and some paper towels to clean that out, but it's just discoloration of the metal. So while you have that off, you want to look at the teeth, make sure that they're clean and uniform, and also the back. And there's a little bit of accumulation on here. I have a very fine flat-bladed file that I use. That's kind of more of a scraper, but it'll just make sure that we're nice and smooth on there. Again, you're not going to be able to fix discoloration, but you can service the rest of this. And then check the washer. The washer's in good condition. I'm going to use some Cal's Universal Drag Grease on that. A lot of folks ask. And this is designed for drag washers. It just keeps them free. I'm going to use my gloved hand as a tool to spread that grease onto the washer. And then when I'm satisfied that we have enough of that, I'm going to wipe off the excess. Just going to reseat that washer into the drag washer and put that in here. Now before I go back putting a lot of parts on, I want to service the pawl on this, because if I start putting parts on and then turn my reel over, all the parts are going to fall out. We took one of the screws that holds the face shield on off when we removed the side plate. There's one more screw hiding underneath on the other side, and we're going to take that off now. And be careful with these things. They're so small. They bounce on your table or your desk or your workbench or whatever you're using. Kind of hard to find, right? So just be careful. I said it a while ago. I haven't said it recently, but an old-timer who was doing this once told me, you don't need much to do reel repair, but what you need is a sense of humor and patience. All right, I've moved the guide over to the right-hand side. That's where I can access the pawl. I'm going to take a screwdriver now to loosen that pawl cap. Now this pawl cap or cover has points on it. So when you go to reassemble this, you'll see they're all kind of sticky up there. When you go to reassemble this guy, be careful. Do not over tighten. You will break it. I've oiled the pawl. We'll go right back in and put that back on. The assembly appears to be very clean, so nothing needed there. And probably for a lot of reasons, sometimes people skip this step, and I think they skip it because there's a certain intimidation factor with these baitcaster reels. So I think they don't know how to get that cover off there, and they kind of let it go. But you should take the time, the effort, and spend the energy, and do not over tighten this. Okay. One more piece, we want to put oil onto the worm gear. And again, you don't need to lubricate these. You want to put a little bit of oil on there, go right ahead. Spin it, make sure that your line guide is working again. And then we can come back, put that face shield back on. And you're going to notice to hold this steady, there's a fork on the bottom here. One rides above, one rides below. Sort of like that. And that's when you know you're properly set. Okay. I've had my first mind lapse. And that was, where does that screw go? Which side? I believe it came out of this side. Because the other side has got the bar that comes through it. So I'm going to, at the risk of having to do this over, I'm going to put that in the right. Now that's why you take pictures, because if you didn't get it right, you can go back to your pictures and find out how you do get it right. All right, here's what we've serviced. That goes on next, but I'm going to do two things first. I'm going to grab that yoke. The yoke has 2 points on it. It has an angular piece, and that's what's going to ride up and down. So that's the back of the yoke. It's going to sit like this, and then the spool side of the gear faces inward. So this is how your gear lines up. And what I want to do now is get a good amount of grease on that gear. On both sides, all around it. Get it into that little groove so that it's on the carrier. Angle side down onto the posts. and this is still triggered to the other side. All right, we're down now. We want to do the same thing here. We checked those teeth before, but we didn't grease them. So let's get grease into the teeth. So overall, these are nice reels, and a lot of folks enjoy the Shimano bait casters, and with good cause. They're good reels all around. I'm putting the main gear on now. It should snap in place, and this is a good time to test. Oops, there we go. So I got ahead of myself, and that's one of the reasons why these parts trays work in particular. So let's get this reset here. Just popped. It's one reason why the parts trays are so valuable. You can look in your parts tray and see what you expect to see. And here's what wasn't working. We were missing this piece. So this piece goes in first, like that. This is what's going to kick the plate here when that plate comes down. So you'll see this will come into lock. Oops, I did it again, didn't I? It's going to lock like this, and then this is going to trip it up when you turn and release. So apologize for bouncing that thing around a little bit, but I thought it was worthwhile showing you. If you're working on an older model, you're going to find that there's an anti-reverse dog on this click ratchet as well. In this case, there's not. All right, so that hard washer went on next, and the main gear goes on, and now we've got a functional reel. And again, you want to make sure that it snaps in place. We have the ferrule, or the sleeve, that's going to operate the anti-reverse. I just take a little bit of the oil off the desk and off my gloves here. I still have a little bit of that left on. Paper towels are great in that regard. And then we're just kind of working back up. We have the two springs that are going to put tension onto the yoke. We have the flat washer and the two tension springs that are going to go on as soon as we put the case on. And everything else is external right now. So we're going to grab that case and reset the case in here, and I just found out that that's where I made my error. So remember what we talked about before in terms of which one belongs on which side on that shield? Well, this belongs on the other side. So I will remove that for a moment. Put the case on. A nice clear snap to that. And then I'm just going to set this one while I go over to the other side, set the other. And we'll come back. So that the screw was the one that was hiding underneath. I knew there was a hide, I just didn't know what side it was on. Proving once again that we are human. Alright, let's get that one on. So now I'm going to come back here. We had a flat washer. We have two tensioning washers. Now these are concave, and I'm going to put them face to face. Give us a little bit more of play in it. Go ahead and put the other two sides plate screws in place. And remembering that that long screw belongs on the bottom. So if you're enjoying this, I would ask you to subscribe to see more of those. That helps my channel succeed, and it also keeps my viewership vibrant. Thank you to all who have just enabled me to go past 10,000 subscribers. Let's go for 11 now. If you have questions about reel service, and whether it's this reel or any reel in general, and let's say you have one apart and you're stuck, send me a note. I will try to help you out along the way. All right, we have a shaft here that we need to put a little bit of grease on. We're going to insert that in. Be careful when you put your spool back in that you have in this case it's braid, but make sure that all of it doesn't get trapped in the surrounds. This has all of the brakes in place. So now we can go ahead and this one just simply sits on, and then you'll notice when it says lock, it says just keep turning this way. Be careful, don't over tighten this. You can snap that off. Just get it right. All right, now we can come back in with the adjuster assembly. And remember we had the square nut, and again this is left-handed, so you're going to thread it counterclockwise, which is also counterintuitive, but that's the way it works there. Next up is the spring, which I stored inside this. And now this one, you want to press down on this before you put the handle in. You got to get the clearance for the handle. You need to seat that square with the square of the nut. So it's kind of a little juggling game, but when you get it, then just find the opposing ones so you can get the handle on and still hold the nut, kind of like what I'm doing here. We can put our handle on. Again, this is going to be a counterclockwise threading on the handle nut. Make sure that you start these by hand so that you feel if you're cross threading. And that was just what was happening there. This was cross threading. And tighten that down as much as you can with your hand. And then make the final turn or two with your 10mm wrench. And this is going to be left hand, so the drag will adjust this way. Make sure that you have that tight. And then we can get the cap on. Now the cap has a little stud in the back. You can see it here. That stud rides here. That's actually going to be the click for your drag, telling you that you're loosening your that. It's a little metal piece. And then we can put that piece in. The screw for the hold down, and we'll give it a test drive. Again, the big issue here was the thumb bar didn't release. We saw why. It was a lot of grease and dirt. See if I can get this in with this. Most sometimes you can. There we go. Give it a spin. Look at that, huh? Most important, does this work? Of course it does. There you go. If you needed to make the spool run freer, you can back this off. If you need to slow it down a little bit, tighten it up. Click, click, it goes. Make sure your pawl and line assembly are working fine. They are. And that's it. That's how you service a Shimano Bantam Curado 201 left-handed low-profile bait caster. Boy, that's a mouthful. What happened to the days of the Mitchell 300? I'd say that in one breath, right? All right, that's it. This one's ready to go fishing again. I hope you've enjoyed it. Again, thank you to all of our first responders and essential personnel. Please like this video and subscribe, and stay tuned for more as I post frequently. So this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.